What you are about to hear is not a podcast. This is a global conversation recorded live in real time with real people.
Journalists,
business leaders,
academics, politicians. I think the terms are deep state. Oh dear.
investors,
Experts, diplomats.
citizens.
Coming together from around the world to share their views and ask our guests the questions. If you would like to join this conversation or hear our incredible library of past conversations, please visit our website, pm101.club, and join the fastest growing conscious community on the free internet. Thanks for being here.
Enjoy the
Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to Politics and Media 101. I'm Jeff Browning, and if you listen to our first few episodes, then you know that over the last few months, my friend Justin Higgins and I and our friends have convened hundreds of conversations, sometimes more than once per day, with up to 30,000 live listeners and participants, where we hear live and direct from people who are in the news, in their own voices, in their own words, in long form, and where anyone who wants to can join to ask them a question, share their thoughts, or just listen. We're just now starting to release recorded portions of our live conversations for the first time, and we're grateful to you for joining us. Today, we're excited to release part of a conversation, interview, and audience Q&A we had with Congressman Ken Buck, a conservative member of Congress from Colorado. Congressman Buck is the top Republican on the House Antitrust Subcommittee, which has jurisdiction over questions about whether Facebook, Google, or other big tech companies should be broken up into smaller pieces. In our last episode, we talked about how the wall between the cyber world and the real world really starts to break down when you have attacks on infrastructure like food, water, or power that mean people suffer in real life. In this episode, we're talking about how the information ecosystem impacts our lives. In democracies, we have the right to understand what's going on around us, speak our mind, and criticize how policymakers respond. But in order for this right to work, we have to have a strong marketplace of ideas, and our information sources need to be moored in truth. Today, many of us get almost all of our information about the weather, notes from friends and family, top news stories, and really everything that helps us understand the world around us from our phones or our computers, where a company on the other side is deciding what we do and don't see and letting other people pay them for the privilege of controlling what we do and don't see. This past week, a lot of information has come to light about how Facebook actually runs. For years, the company has been aware that its platform, as well as Instagram and WhatsApp, which it also owns, create real danger and harm in the real world. Our antitrust laws, which were originally conceived 100 years ago to make sure big railroad and oil companies don't gain too much anti-competitive power, may need to be adjusted for new behemoths like tech companies whose sole business is to collect data about us and then use it to predict and manipulate our thoughts and behavior. Given that Congressman Buck is the top Republican voice in the House on antitrust issues, it was a very timely conversation. We had incredible audience questions, and we hope you enjoy it. As always, if you like or dislike what you hear, if you want to find out how to join us live almost every day of the week, maybe ask one of our upcoming guests a question, or hear past episodes, please visit our website, pm101.live or pm101.club. They both work and will get you to the same place where you can find all that and more. Without any further ado, let's roll the tape.
Jumping right into it, Congressman Buck, you are literally at the forefront of 5 bipartisan proposals aimed at curbing the anti-competitive power of major tech firms. I'm thinking Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. Can you tell us how you came to understand this problem and maybe the evidence you've seen that these firms have gotten too big and are stifling the free market values that America has been founded on?
So we had a 16-month investigation in the Antitrust Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee in the House, and what I saw there was really astonishing to me. I prosecuted for 25 years, and much of that time I'd been involved in white-collar fraud, and the conduct of these 4 companies reminded me of the fraud that I saw from the criminals that I prosecuted. They're really, I don't know, how to say this politely, but they are, they're companies that are so focused on profit. And I'm all about profit. I'm all about capitalism. I think it has lifted more people out of poverty than any other economic system. And I just think that these companies have really gone overboard. In addition to seeking profit at the expense of people, they have also just crushed competition. The majority, the Democrats wrote a 350-page report. I answered that with a report of my own that was probably about 15 pages. And we talk about the facts that we discovered, but really the conclusion is very simple. These companies are monopolies, and we need to help create competition in the marketplace.
So, by introducing new tools, which is what your legislation is, we seem to be acknowledging that the existing antitrust framework is not equipped to deal with the realities of the current economy, specifically the era of big tech. Can you kind of walk us through? We're not lawyers like you. We weren't prosecutors. Can you walk us through how these tools sorry, can you explain to us how the current tools are outdated and maybe why we need some new ones?
Sure. So when the Sherman Act was passed in the late 1800s and the Clayton Act was passed in the early 1900s, we had businesses that were easily identifiable, and the law was written in a way that prohibited monopolies and anti-competitive behavior. When I say that the businesses were easily identifiable, a railroad's a railroad, and a oil company is an oil company. Now we've moved into an area that we have a Facebook, and how do you define what Facebook is? It's a social media platform. Well, there's dozens of social media platforms, so it's not a monopoly. There's many competitors. It's a social media platform that performs these particular functions. It's a social media platform that has Instagram associated with it and WhatsApp associated with it in a way that enhances and really furthers its monopoly power. So it's very hard to define what the market is, much less the market share of these companies. And the other really difficult thing to do with the law as it existed is one of the tests for determining whether behavior is anti-competitive is to determine whether it hurts consumers. In this case, the courts had developed a pretty simple standard. Are prices to consumers going up? And when you use Google as a search engine, you don't pay anything. And so the courts said, well, of course Google can do what it wants because there is no price impact on consumers. And we need a broader definition of consumer welfare than what the courts had developed when we had sort of these traditional non-tech companies that existed. If there was a monopoly in the oil and gas industry, you could measure it by price to consumers. You can't measure something by price to consumers when you're talking about Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple. And so really the bottom line is that there are so many other impacts to consumers by not having competition in the marketplace. Ultimately, what we think will happen is that if consumers can take their digital file and move to other search engines, that Google will offer them money to stay, and other search engines will offer them money to leave. And that's how competition is supposed to work in the marketplace. So there is an economic impact to consumers. It's just not measurable now because Google doesn't charge anything or give anything for consumers to use Google.
I want to get a little bit deeper into one of the other bills. I know you just mentioned the data bill, which is really, really important. I want to get into the Platform Competition and Opportunity Act that you're also a co-author of, co-sponsor, which would prevent many acquisitions. And this is the question that I have for you, Congressman. One of the ways that big tech companies act in anti-competitive ways is that they simply buy their competitors. Yet, many investors are only willing to invest in digital startups because of the potential for this type of acquisition from Google, from Facebook, from Amazon. Does this legislation risk stifling innovation?
No, it does the exact opposite. What it does is a lot of these startup companies get bought, and then these big tech giants stick it on the shelf so it doesn't compete with them. And a lot of these companies would be purchased by Oracle, by Microsoft, by other technology companies to develop that. We saw that Oracle and Microsoft were competing to buy TikTok, and so there is a marketplace for startups beyond these four companies. But if these four companies continue to buy all the startups, and the bill doesn't prohibit, by the way, doesn't prohibit mergers and acquisitions by the four monopolies. What it does is it says the monopoly has to show that the acquisition is pro-competitive, as opposed to the government showing that it is anti-competitive.
Congressman, today I think we witnessed historic testimony. It gave a lot of people flashes to when those big tobacco CEOs were up there. But today was a whistleblower, Frances Haugen from Facebook. Can you tell us your reaction to her revelations, either today in the Senate or if you were traveling in the district, maybe from Facebook files or the 60 Minutes interview that she gave?
Yeah, I can tell you the things that I've read in the Wall Street Journal and other accounts of her testimony and appearance on 60 Minutes and the New York Times article. I think it's clear that she was an insider, that she had access to a lot of information. And what she says is supported by the documents that she had. Facebook put out a statement afterwards that I thought was really combative and in a lot of ways petty. And it says, she was never in the C room or with the top officials of the corporation. She has documents. There are studies that Facebook conducted that show just how harmful their product is, and they did nothing about it. And to say that somehow she's less credible because she wasn't holding a senior position is undermined by the nature of these documents. So I think she was credible and really harmful. And it goes back to your last question, really. Facebook purchased Instagram, and there wasn't anything the government could show in terms of anti-competitive behavior at the time. Facebook was dominant on home computers, and Instagram was building a mobile app that was very powerful. And so when Facebook purchased it, what it effectively did is if we now had Facebook and Instagram operating on mobile devices, if Facebook had to create their own Instagram, we would have two competitors in the marketplace. And parents who were concerned about their teenagers, particularly teenage daughters, using Instagram because of the high suicide rates and the eating disorders and the other issues that are out there as a result of Instagram's really marketing to these teenagers. A parent would have a choice, and the marketplace would start to adapt to the choice that we need. And I think it would, without any outside government regulation, it would serve to make the product safer for these young teenagers.
Yeah, I want to ask you about another marketplace. Today, with social media being dominated by big tech firms, you said Facebook owns Instagram. They also own WhatsApp. There's Twitter and others. Is the marketplace of ideas still possible in the age of social media?
Is the marketplace of ideas what?
Still possible in the age of social media with these big tech companies and their algorithms manipulating everything? Can we still have a free exchange of ideas on the internet, on these platforms, or is it convoluted because of the way they approach their profit margins?
Well, I think it's, Section 230 in subsection C says that a platform is immune from liability if it takes down a post. And the term that's really troubling is if it is otherwise objectionable. And so you've got individuals making a determination on what is objectionable. And there's bias that is brought into any of those kinds of determinations. And so there was a time when Twitter and Facebook took down any post that suggested that this virus could have originated in the Wuhan lab and escaped from that lab. And now it's a very serious discussion. But that's the problem with giving people the ability to make those kinds of decisions. And so I think if we have, again, the same thing has happened in newspapers, where we have more conservative newspapers like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post and others. And we have more liberal newspapers like the Washington Post and New York Times and others. And people have a choice of where they want to get their information. And a lot of times people will look at different newspapers. The same thing with cable news, the same thing with talk radio. And so the key to me is that we have this competition in the marketplace, that there are many Facebooks and Googles and Twitters and others. And so people can get their information in the same way that they have all along. And we don't have to rely on either censors within Facebook or censors within government to make those decisions. And when we give people more information, I believe we get back to the marketplace of ideas and people make the right decisions.
Congressman, you mentioned Section 230. And for everybody in the audience, currently internet platforms are legally protected against lawsuits for the content they host on their platform due to certain sections in Section 230. The Facebook whistleblower today suggested modifying this to hold platforms responsible not for the content that you or I generate on their platform, but how their algorithms promote or amplify harmful content that actually has real world implications. So one of the big allegations that the whistleblower made that's supported by documents is Facebook is amplifying content on Instagram that creates eating disorders in teenage girls and young girls. Where do you stand on this type of modification of Section 230? And where do you stand on maybe repealing Section 230 as a whole?
Well, I'm not in favor of repealing Section 230, because what happens when you repeal Section 230 is the small companies get sued out of business, and the big companies can afford the legal teams to defend the lawsuits. And the big companies, the Facebooks, the monopolies win in that situation. So I think we need to have a Section 230, but it has to be very limited and precise in what we are immunizing and what we are not immunizing. And in my view, again, more information is better. And so we need more competition in the marketplace. So it's a combination of antitrust law and reforming Section 230 that gets us down the road to where we do promote good exchange of information in our society.
And what do you think about reforming Section 230 to not hold the contents liable for specific content, but more how their algorithms choose the winners and losers? Because we don't have free speech on Facebook. Facebook currently chooses what content we see, how often we see it, and that has a whole host of consequences. So when you're looking at reforming 230, what would be the goal of reforming 230?
Well, algorithms are something that almost impossible to figure out from the outside exactly what the intent was, and we know what the result is. Oftentimes, their favorite politicians, their favorite issues are highlighted, and other issues are put on the last page, and so we can see that. We don't know. I don't certainly know how they do it with an algorithm, but they do it. And I think the answer again is you can't legislate for a company to fairly create an algorithm, because you're in nonstop litigation with a company, or you create some kind of public utilities commission, which is an absolute disaster because they're always captured by the biggest companies that they're trying to regulate. So in my view, the best way to create the kind of really diversity in the marketplace of ideas is to have a number of Googles and to with market share. And that's what I think. And some of that is just consumer choice. There are products I don't buy in the marketplace because I'm offended by the political views of a company, or I'm offended by the actions of the result of their product and whatnot. So I stay away from some companies. And if we have a number of Facebooks, people can make that kind of choice.
That is true. Choice gives some freedom to the consumer. So I want to get into the political type of stuff because, Congressman, when you introduced your antitrust legislation, I think it was back in June, and you worked it through committee with Cicilline, Democrat from Rhode Island, you came under attack from GOP leadership, from establishment figures. Today, where does support stand in your caucus for the 5 antitrust bills? And I'm specifically thinking the leadership of your caucus.
Yeah, well, the leadership of my caucus is different than the support in the caucus. I am really pleased with the momentum that we have been gaining. And you can see some of that from over on the Senate side. Senator Thune made a statement today after the Facebook hearing that it's time we use the antitrust laws to make sure we have competition in the marketplace with these big tech companies. There were probably 7 or 8 different senators who made comments about the need to use antitrust laws specifically. We've heard Donald Trump over and over say that he wants these companies broken up. So I think there are people on our side that are really getting involved and understanding the nature of the problem and the need for this antitrust solution. The reality is that these companies are the largest companies in the history of the world. We've never had corporations as big as these 4 corporations. And they have literally just conservative and liberal opinion makers in Washington, D.C. They have donated so much money to so many groups that they are influencing the landscape, and that influences leadership in both parties.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of follow up on that influence. There's a Politico article that quotes you criticizing the influence of these lobbyists. I think it's again back in June. Do you think that let's assume you guys retake the House in 2022, which is looking like a good proposition. Do you think that the influence of these lobbyists and the influence they specifically have over Kevin McCarthy is so strong that it will prevent meaningful action on legislation to hit the floor when you do retake the House?
I think that there is a very good chance that the 6 bills that we're talking about will pass in this Congress, and they will pass the Senate, and we will go to conference committee and get bills passed out of Congress and signed by the president. So really what we're focused on is future legislation to either refine these bills in some way or to address some other issues. And we're certainly working on other industries like the pharmaceutical industry, and there are things we can do in the antitrust area to drive down drug prices to a certain extent. So there is other antitrust work to be done. I don't think that anybody in leadership is objecting to the use of antitrust as a tool. I do think that there are issues with the antitrust in these big tech firms. I'm not going to go to motives and suggest anybody has an ill motive or a corrupt motive. But I do hope that we get these 6 bills through in this Congress.
So we're going to go to Greg Sattel for the first question and then Stephanie for the next one. Greg, over to you.
Thank you for that, Justin, and thank you for joining us, Congressman. So my question is, it seems to me that there's sort of 2 schools of thought about how to approach the issue of information on social media. The first one says, well, we need better moderation and we need better fact checking. And the other one says, and there was some interesting work about this out of MIT in the past few months, says that no, the real problem is how the algorithms structure the conversations, and that the algorithms specifically um, create homogenous audiences that form echo chambers. And even if the content is moderated or is fact checked, they will reject those fact checks because it because of the homogenous nature of that little section of the social network. If you could make any regulation, if you had the power to enact any regulation, which approach would you take? The more moderation, or attack, or would you focus on how the conversations are structured?
Neither. I think that, I'm a conservative. I don't want to see government creating regulations. I don't want to see government going into these companies and saying, you can do this, you can't do that. I think that the important way to get to the end result that we all seek, which is more accurate information, but more diverse information, and allowing the consumers to make the choice, is to have competition, and the competition will change the algorithms. If I'm Fox News, and I'm trying to appeal to a certain group, I invite certain guests on, I hire certain hosts. If I'm MSNBC and I want to appeal to a different group, I go ahead and appeal to a different group with different hosts and different guests. And if I'm Ken Buck and I'm saying to myself, I wonder what the other side thinks, I go over to MSNBC and I listen to them. And I also listen to Fox. And I think that's really, we can't ever get to the point in our country where we say our citizens are just not capable of accepting information and deciphering that information. Our education system has failed us in that situation. And our constitutional protections on speech have failed us in that situation. And so I think it's important that we create competition and not regulation.
Thank you for that question, Greg. We will go to Stephanie and then Jim. Stephanie, over to you.
Justin, thank you so much for once again hosting a phenomenal room. Congressman Buck, it's an honor and pleasure to have you here having this incredibly important conversation. I have a question for you, because I wonder, I'm so aligned with your thinking relative to competition and the concern I have about we do not understand how to deal with, antitrust legislation, of course, from back in the day was dealing with other things relative to traditional monopolies. We don't really have anything that fully integrates the concept of platforms that have billions of users. And how do you quantify that? And how do you, again, to your point, I hate the word regulation as well. But do you wonder, in terms of information that is shared, we talk about multiple platforms potentially, as you had mentioned, and the possibility of how algorithms move through that space. But I wonder, since really platforms are not built by necessarily the developers, they're built by the users. And do we just wind up with, is there a case to be made for winding up with perhaps multiple search engines, multiple social platforms, but you still wind up in silos of information because users dictate what they're interested in? Like, how do we encourage a more broad diet of information consumption, right? Which I think encourages critical thinking and some other things. Indeed, I think healthy democracies are born of an informed republic. How do we do that? It feels almost impossible, but it sounds like you have some ideas. If that question made sense to you.
No, I saw a question mark about 6 different places in that question, and I'm happy to try to answer.
Sorry about that.
Of them. But I think what we really have to recognize is the role of our education system in creating critical thinkers in America. And yes, we all live in silos, and yet those of us that care about critical thinking do our best to break out of those silos and see other information and read other information. And so I think it's really important that we have that diversity of information. If we ever get to the point where Facebook's monopoly is allowed to exist, and Google's monopoly, and Amazon and the books it sells, and Twitter and others, if we ever get to the point where we say, well, we're going to let that monopoly exist, we're just going to have some folks that are going to make sure that only the right information gets out. We've got huge problems in this country. And so I think, yes, we live in silos. We've got to encourage people from a very young age to engage in critical thinking and to get out of the silos that we all live in. But I'll give you an example. When the Attorney General, who's a former federal judge, sent a letter to the FBI yesterday asking the FBI to investigate and make sure that school boards are protected that are promoting critical race theory from parents who object to critical race theory being taught in the schools. We've got a serious problem. That is free speech. And if those folks want to go to a school board meeting and object, that is absolutely the public platform. By the way, not a woman's bathroom. That is not the public platform to express your objections. But a school board meeting is the public platform for that kind of speech. And so, again, I think that I read several different news sources every day. And I think, and obviously I'm in the business of needing that diversity of news. But I think we can't accept the fact that we can just change an algorithm and things will be all right, or we can just make sure that we don't live in silos, that every once in a while we let things from one silo seep into another. I think that the key here is that we have those diverse news sources so that people can learn, and one source is going to be less credible than the other eventually if it continues to put out bad information. And so I think the vaccine has taught us a lot about how we should get information and process information. And sometimes people are wrong in the conclusions that they draw, but that's okay. They draw conclusions based on the effort that they put into finding the correct answer.
Thank you for that question, Stephanie. Yeah, that was very gross when they harassed that senator in the bathroom. We will go to Jim, and then we will go to Andrea.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Congressman. Greatly appreciate the overview, and really appreciate your efforts for focusing on antitrust. I want to key back, though, I think a bit to the last question as well as what Greg said, and I'm interpreting your position to be that you see market diversity and application of antitrust as a way to foster other sources of news and downplay the problems associated with the algorithm, which were clearly and explicitly discussed today, as well as reemphasized by a couple of the folks here in this forum. And where I'm getting a little hung up is that if you look at big tobacco as a comparison, and I've used big tobacco as a comparison in this clubhouse before, as well as was very happy to see Ms. Hogan call it out today. Big tobacco had 8 CEOs that were all hauled in front of Congress, and they were all accused essentially of doing the same thing in terms of how they were manipulating their population in order to maintain engagement and continue to expand engagement, which is exactly what she was saying that the algorithmically derived content is doing on Facebook. So I'm just having a hard time understanding, even if I promote additional players in the market, if the core issues is around manipulation of the customer, which is fundamentally what she accused them of today, how do you see that market diversity improving that, sir? Thank you.
Well, great question. I think that, the market diversity, as you call it, or competition in the marketplace, gives consumers choice. And frankly, I grew up in a home, my dad smoked. I watched commercials with cute little camels running around promoting smoking. I never touched cigarettes. And so it's one of those things for me. I understand that big tobacco was really creating marketing an image, and even allegations of some more highly addictive substances being put into cigarettes to keep people coming back. I get all of that. But I think when you're talking about information, and by the way, people die of smoking cigarettes over 30, 40, 50 years. These teenage girls are dying in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And so little difference in terms of the comparison. I don't want to let Facebook off with an easy comparison like big tobacco. I think they are worse, and I think they knew they were worse. But from my perspective, the answer is having that consumer choice. We have non-alcoholic beer. We have things in other marketplaces that can appeal to people in ways that are not as dangerous. And while we certainly there are some legitimate comparisons to how tobacco has marketed itself and how these four monopolies have marketed themselves, I think that the answer in tobacco is there is no real tobacco that is going to enhance your health, your physical health. There are platforms that can enhance your physical health, that can enhance your knowledge base. And so I think that the analysis isn't necessarily one that is equal.
Thank you for that, Congressman. We are going to go to Kidus, and then last one is somebody who's worked with your office, Courtney. But Kidus, over to you.
Thanks, Justin. I just wanted to ask about the fact that it seems members of Congress, whenever they question leaders in technology in these congressional hearings, they seem uninformed about the type of technology that they're asking about. So why does it seem like does this have to do with the fact that there is a shortage of tech staffers in Congress due to the disparity in pay for congressional staffers versus Silicon Valley? And if so, why is this problem not being addressed in a more serious manner?
So are you asking why are members of Congress uninformed about technology?
Why are either members of Congress or their staffers? Like why is it that members of Congress seem to be uninformed about the people that they're questioning in these hearings? Don't they have the ability, the staffers that they need in order to be able to be informed about this? And if so, is this affected by the disparity in pay between congressional staffers?
Sure. So let me tell you, when my parents were setting up a stereo system, they called me over at 8 years old to set up the system. When I'm setting up my home computer, I call my 5-year-old grandson over to set up my home computer. There are a lot of things that go on in generations that continue, and I think that the kind of technology that we're dealing with today is not something that most members of Congress grew up with. Now, there are certainly some younger members, under 40 members of Congress, but most of us have had a lifetime of experience in another area and then ran for Congress and came in. As for staffers, I am absolutely blessed by having staffers who are outstanding in the technology area as well as, frankly, the antitrust area. None of them practiced in antitrust, but they all got up to speed very quickly with antitrust. And so I think that what you expect from your member of Congress and frankly from staff, I have, basically 6 staffers and 4 in the policy area in my office in DC. And those are the policy people. I have 4 policy people. So what you expect from your member of Congress is to have knowledge that is an inch deep and a mile wide. And so tomorrow I've got to be an expert on China flying airplanes over fighter airplanes, military airplanes over Taiwan. I've got to be an expert in space warfare with Russia. And the next day I've got to be an expert in inflation and energy policy relating to, producing energy here versus buying petroleum products from Saudi Arabia. So it's very difficult to have the time to dig deep. I dug deep on antitrust and big tech. Other members had other responsibilities based on their committee assignments, and it's I don't know if it's a satisfactory answer, but it's the best answer I can give you. We're expected, we walk on the floor at any minute, and we're expected to vote on things that are just very diverse in terms of the subject matters that we're expected to know.
Thank you very much. The last question, we have a hard out in 3 minutes, is going to go to Courtney. Courtney, over to you.
Hello, Congressman. Good to hear from you. I wanted to know what you think that some of the proposed regulation might do for competition in tech. So I have a food and travel site of my own. I have been very fortunate and been able to kind of grow my own really large publication because of these free outlets. And while I am very much at the mercies of Facebook and Google and YouTube and every different algorithm, I'm also really fortunate that I've been able to grow a large business that now employs 4 different women through their channels. And I'm concerned that some of the regulation will slow down some of the creativity that these platforms have given us. But on the flip side, I am definitely concerned about the health aspects that were brought up today. So if you could just talk about some of the concerns we have with overregulation and what it could do for creativity and innovation, especially when it comes to social media.
Sure. So as I've said before, Courtney, by the way, hello.
Hi.
It's good to hear your voice.
Good to hear from you.
But as I said, I am opposed to regulation because it is a sort of government top-down solution, and it's not one that I embrace. I am in favor of a bottom-up competition solution, and the competition model, I think, is far more robust for creativity and allowing those other businesses to flourish. And I think what you'll see is as we create competition for Google and create competition for these other companies, you will see those companies even investing more in smaller businesses and startups and innovative ideas and platforms and technology. And so, and that's what's happened in the past. I don't think if the government regulated Ma Bell, I don't think we would have cell phones. I don't think we would have iPhones or Androids. I think we would be stuck in a different era. If the government regulated automobiles, we wouldn't have Tesla. We wouldn't have those kinds of innovations that we see today, both in safety, efficiency, and comfort. And so the key from my perspective is that we have really a broad range of choices for you to do business with.
Thank you very much, Congressman, for joining us and being very liberal with your time. I just wanted to leave you with any last words.
That is the first time anybody ever used the word liberal and Ken Buck in the same sentence, so be careful.
I felt bad saying it immediately. No, do you want to leave us with any last words about freedom, big tech, whatever you're thinking?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. I think this platform is exactly what we need. We need a discussion of ideas, and I'm glad that Debbie Dingell was on yesterday or last week, whenever she was on, and I'm glad that you had me on. And I hope you have a broad range of opinions on different subjects, because the key from my perspective is that we help opinion makers like the folks who are listening today get information. I hope that some of you agreed with me a little bit. I hope none of you agreed with me completely, because that would be dangerous, especially a Ken Buck idea. But I think it's really great that you're doing this, and I applaud you for it. And I would love to come back anytime that you'll have me.
The floor is yours, Congressman. Thank you very much for your time. Go get some rest and enjoy your time in your district before you come back to the swamp.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Well, that's all we have for you today. Again, huge thanks to Congressman Buck and his team, to our audience for their questions, and to you for being here. If you like or dislike what you hear, if you want to find past episodes or learn more about how to join us live almost every day of the week, please visit our website, pm101.club or pm101.live. They both work and will get you to the same place where you can find all that and more. This has been Politics and Media 101. I'm Jeff Browning. On behalf of Justin Higgins, our co-founder, and our team, thank you very much for being here. We hope to see you and hear from you soon.